Hi, welcome to Industries Live. This is a show that we are on every other Tuesday, and we are excited to be joining you again today. I am Dr. Karen Hildebrand. I lead solutions architects in some of our industries at AWS. So I sit on the technical side of the house, and I have a background in artificial intelligence. So I'm really excited about today's conversations. I think they'll be super topical, but also really interesting to our financial services organizations, as well as many of our customers who are dealing with these same types of challenges, but may not be in financial services. So excited to join you today. I am joining from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I just returned from Lithuania. So I am super curious where all of you are joining us from. So please today, throughout the discussion, drop in the comments where you're joining us from, any questions you have, and I will be watching the comments as they come in live. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Addy. Addy, would you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Karen. Hey, everyone. I'm Addy Dubhashi. I've had the chance to be with AWS for the past 7 years and have led financial services partnerships, where my team is part of the Center of Excellence, where we build industry solutions that enable our customers to accelerate to the cloud and drive transformation. What's really exciting to our team is when our partners come together with AWS to solve a unique line of business challenge. And so we're not kind of thinking about the technical aspects of a business goal, but rather the business challenges, how we solve for them, how we can bring about compliance and solve for those business economics that customers ask us for. And so one of the most interesting topics, having a background in banking and having been in an investment bank in the past, I've seen in real time how risk is right at the heart of their decision making. And so having the right systems in place is so important. And so really excited about our conversation today with Smarsh and Genpact. Looking forward to that.
That's fantastic. And I think you hit on a good point there, Addy, that AWS has invested in industry experts and people that have worked in those specific industries before coming to the technology side of the house. So most of our conversations in Industries Live and beyond, as we're talking to our customers, are really about what are they trying to solve, less so about the cloud services that are behind that. So we won't be talking a lot about AWS services here today. We'll talk a lot more about what we're actually solving for our customers and how partners are able to accelerate that effort. So with that, let's bring our first partner on. Brandon, perfect. Brandon, are you able to hear us? Hopefully all good.
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. And thank you all for having me. I'm Brandon Carl. I work at Smarsh, where I oversee our AI and machine learning efforts.
Fantastic. That leads us to the very next question. Tell us about Smarsh.
Wonderful. Yeah, so Smarsh is probably one of the biggest companies that many people have never heard of. What we do is we process communications data globally for the largest financial services institutions in order to keep the banks safe and the market safe and their customers safe. And we do that with very large scale AI and machine learning built entirely on the backbone of AWS.
It's a fascinating space because these large institutions have such wide groups of teams. These are teams that often have to think about a certain business role and working on certain key instruments that have risk. But at the same time, you are working with teams and colleagues that should not be sharing information with other parts of the organization. Mm-hmm. There are regulatory frameworks here that help you, and that they're necessary for the market to operate smoothly and efficiently. And so it's such an important space to be in where Smarsh is. Even in our age today, with the number of communications that happen, our regulators are asking us to stay on top of a number of challenges around communication. So, Brandon, what are some of the common challenges you've seen, play out over the past year, and what are the asks coming in a post-Gen AI world?
Wonderful. Yeah, we'd love to talk about that. And I think to your point as well, in terms of the passion for solving this problem and the impact in terms of how financial services companies focus on this. I actually personally spent the first decade of my career on Wall Street. I worked in interest rate derivatives, which I call the good kind, not the evil kind. But I worked front of the lines in terms of both the mortgage crisis and the banking crisis side of that. And while I met many of the most amazing people I know in my life there, I also saw the impacts of misconduct and what happens when the system goes awry firsthand. And that's been a real passion as we built out this team over the past decade in terms of how we keep these firms safer. So when you fast forward to today, right, the core thing that the firms are trying to do is they're trying to ensure that by using communications data and other data, that they're keeping everything safe. Now, it's really a task that only machines can do at the scale that's necessary, right? You can't go hire a second bank to read through all of the communications of the first bank. You, in fact, need to use large-scale AI and machine learning. And so the three key trends that we have seen emerge over the past year or so, number one, there's been an open arms adoption with respect to AI and machine learning. People are saying, okay, we have an opportunity to really take the mission that we have, de-risking our firms in the markets much, much further on that front. And so the first aspect is that broad-based adoption of AI and machine learning. The second aspect is they're saying, okay, as we have machines that are doing more, what tools can we give to people to actually make them even better at their jobs? And we see a deep interest in terms of how they empower their teams further. And then the third key thing that we see rising up is obviously the broad-based use of generative AI. So before, it may be that you're watching for, inappropriate behaviors or signs in terms of employee to employee or employee to customer. Now you actually have the machine in the loop, where the machines are talking to the employees or talking to the customers. And it's adding this new dimension in terms of, what happens when, in the event that there are risks that emerge out of that.
It's a fascinating space. One of the themes that emerges, the number of channels that have increased in our industry. Once upon a time, it was email and that's it. And then if you're in office and communications would follow memos. But in today's day, we have a number of these channels. We're hopping between Slack and our CRM tools. We're jumping into chats over email or our tools. But also, our devices are complex. And Smarsh is just at such an interesting space where you have to continually digest these multiple channels as you're constantly maintaining that context of surveilling the right aspects of trading and risk.
That's right. And I think that it's surprising to people who are not familiar with it exactly how many of those channels people communicate on. I mean, today you've probably obviously logged into email. We're here in terms of StreamYard. We're broadcasting to YouTube and Twitch and the like, probably been on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of those sorts of things that are in place. And so for large firms, it's not uncommon for them to have 80 different channels. And the really interesting aspect is, if you think about it, you have a different digital identity on every one of those channels. One of the things we do is we bring together those into a unified digital identity, which is how firms are then able to really get a deep understanding of what's happening.
I like your call out there of all of the different platforms that people might be joining us on as well. So we do have viewers that are joining us from LA and from India. So please drop in the comments where you're joining us from. It's always great to see some interaction from those that are with us here today. And I think your call out about specific communication challenge or channels that you have to monitor. And when you're thinking about that from a compliance standpoint, you've built the intelligent agent on AWS. Can you tell us a little bit about what is that solving for? Why did you build it on AWS? And why do our customers that are listening here today care?
Absolutely. It's been a really fantastic journey, and we've had a great account team to work with at AWS. We've also been able to partner with the industry as we've built this out. So if we take a look at the core challenge, I can then talk about what problem this solves and then how we solve this. But the core challenge, as I indicated, is that firms need to be able to surface evidence of misconduct or bad behavior, bad actors within their companies. And fortunately, this is a problem that is incredibly rare and hard to find. So on average, it would take about 200,000 communications before you find one instance of misconduct. And that means that in comparison, your house would be about 100 times more likely to be hit by lightning in a year, than randomly looking at that. So it gives you an idea of how rare these things are. So on one hand, that's fantastic. None of us are wishing for a world in which case there are more bad actors or misconduct or the like. But on the other hand, it makes it almost impossibly difficult to find. And what that means historically is that firms are reading through far more communications than they need to. And that means that, more than 99 times out of 100 that they're looking at something, they're just not finding the sorts of things that they look for. And this is the problem that we solve with Intelligent Agent. By partnering with top partners in the industry, We took our AI and machine learning teams, who they're on their 8th book, by the way, that they've published. I can give a specific plug to that later. We brought them and gave them the specific problem of how do we emulate the expertise of a compliance analyst so as to make that entire workflow much, much more efficient. And it's required a variety of different techniques to land there, but we're really pleased by the results that we're seeing.
It's such an interesting challenge, and institutions have had to do this for a very long time. Maintaining complete oversight on surveillance was requirements by the SEC, by FINRA. These regulations were in place so that key decision makers were not intentionally acting as working as bad actors, but also was there any form of incorrect messaging that could be translated towards a actionable trade or an impact from that. And so context is so important in these scenarios. In a post-Gen AI world, you're going to have context so relevant because the amount of data being generated, the amount of documents and communications are going to go up. And so, Brandon, what do you see coming in this space? Because this is going to really shape communication journeys in an infinite world of data being generated.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. A couple different things. Let me start maybe with risk and legal and compliance, and then look in terms of more broadly. Within risk, legal, and compliance, it's really those two trends that I talked about, which is how do we, number one, make it so that there's less noise and more signal, right? How do we make sure that we have people focusing on the things that matter the most? And then when they find those things, how do we let them interact with agents or Gen AI to go and perform investigations for them and to engage in their data that way? And so within that specific use case, again, we're going to see people much more efficient in terms of how they swim through these copious amounts of data. But the second thing that's very clearly emerging is that whereas historically people viewed the company's communications almost as what they would call an archive, right? It's something that, we joke sometimes where data goes to die, right? That would have been a historical industry view of this. But what has happened now is everyone has woken to the concept that this is actually really valuable data, right? That within the communications, this is the lifeblood of your company. This is how you figure out how to service your customers better. It's how you make sure that you diffuse what we talked about with bad actors, reduce operational risks, those sorts of things. And so at all of these firms, the individuals in compliance are the stewards of this data. They actually have the right and the responsibility to govern that in the right way. And so these teams are finding themselves at the center of the firm's broader communications data strategy with intelligence on top of that. It's a really big trend, and I think we're really in the first inning of that right now.
I happened to read a very interesting report that y'all published where I think y'all were able to bring about 77% improvement in the efficiencies of these workflows, and then improving one of the hardest metrics out there, false flagging, by putting the right case forward up to 98%. I mean, these are unheard numbers. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. And what we found, really two things. Number one, we could not operate at the scale that we do without AWS. And by scale, I not only mean the ways that we traditionally think about in terms of volume, but in terms of the global reach, right? In terms of the enterprise hardening and all of the different aspects that are required there. And then the second thing is you find that there's not just one tool for the job. A lot of times people will mentally go, all I need to do is say prompt, pretend you're a compliance analyst, and that Gen AI will fill in the blanks. And what we find in practice is it's obviously not that easy. You need entire scaffolding around systems. You need to make sure that you have versioning and rollbacks and controls and auditability. And you need to basically work through things like randomness that happens within these items. So it's an entire litany of different techniques that come together to make these things work in a performant way, but also in a way that firms can rely on them and be confident that they're not introducing systematic bias and all of those sorts of issues in place.
Brandon, I think we could talk for a very long time about all of the different techniques that you have to interplay against each other in order to be able to reduce that amount of false flagging, but also to take all of those signals in and, to your point, create a unified person out of all of the different devices and channels that they're able to communicate in. But I realize this is not a technical stream going down deep into the details of that, as much as I love it. But maybe you could share with us instead a little bit about some of the success you've seen in this space, and
Mhm.
maybe what you can tell us about what some of your enterprise customers are benefiting from when they've been working with you.
Absolutely. And I mentioned earlier that we've now been in this space for running production grade and large scale AI and machine learning for close to a decade. And through that, it requires, I think to your point, Karen, an ongoing evolution of the technologies that are in place. We've had an opportunity to work with over half of the top banks in the world with respect to the programs and how they do this. And the impacts that we find are along the lines of what we were indicating, where effectively it's changing the nature and the dynamic of their programs, where they can focus less on the noise and more on the true risks. But it's extending from there in terms of how do you approach things across languages, right? I think historically, machine learning was very Anglo-centric or very kind of English-oriented, and there's been a huge expansion in terms of how you approach that. It's extended from electronic or written communications to voice communications and how they actually de-risk their firms on that front. But really importantly, Karen, in addition to all of those benefits of de-risking the firms, of getting more efficient and offering the workers better experiences on that front, it's also now beginning to lay the template and the groundwork for how they approach different business lines. And that's that combination of basically results and compliance, right? Results for the employees, and then how you impact the broader business has really been a critical and important one too.
Yeah.
I actually just, it's going to be a shameless plug, Karen, but this is exactly why we really appreciate our financial services competency partners. So Smarsh is a competency partner. We recognize that specialization that they have for the industry, but a number of AWS teams actually double down because of that known specialization. So by taking that competency, we publish thought leadership out there together. We're driving go-to-market activities such as events and customer education webinars and seminars such as these, and then running those on-the-ground co-sell motions where we really think about showcasing and demoing these at our customers, making it really easy for them to get started, almost playing with synthetic data to experience how the product can fit, and then driving investments into proof of concept. So yeah, just a quick shameless plug there, folks, but that's one of those go-to-markets that really work.
We often talk about that internally of like, we're not going to talk about this from a marketing standpoint, but indeed, I loved your shameless plug. That was fantastic, Addie. Of course, our competency partners are really helpful in helping our customers to find partners who have done this before. And I think, Brandon, what you were able to say there about having over a decade of production level workloads is exactly what we're talking about. I know that I came from a customer prior to joining AWS, and we had a bank charter at that time. And these same problems that you're describing are absolutely what we were doing a decade ago, just not as quickly and not as accurately as we can do now. And so I think that evolution and that constant striving to lower the cost of being able to do this level of kind of unified standards, unified communication protocols, et cetera, is really what's different about how Smarsh is approaching this. And I think that's why we really like to share partners where we see it's, you have a distinct way of approaching the customer problem, and we want our customers to be able to see that. By the way, we did also get a new customer who is not shy in being able to say where they're from. So we have New Jersey joining in, but we'd love to hear from any of the other customers. Do you have questions that you want us to be asking Brandon here live? I am watching them on the side of the screen while Addie tees up the next question. So keep me busy. Let me know what questions you have as well.
My next question is going to get, forecasting and looking forward. I'm seeing an agentic world coming on. We recently launched our agentic marketplace. One of the simplest messages that came from one of our strategy partners was, the agents have agency. They're going to be able to take action. And now, when it comes to decreasing those false flags, when it comes to identifying how you can extend some of those repositories that you've generated, that nuanced context that you've generated as Smarsh, how can we accelerate, an institution to make most of this data? I'm thinking out loud with asset managers in the future getting better at recommending the right products to their customers, but also, hey, wait a second, are we recommending something that's outside of the risk parameter of this particular end customer? And should we, know early on to protect ourselves and set those guardrails? So Brandon, what are you seeing coming up?
Yeah. And one of the things you brought up, I think, is so critical, Addie, which is when I'm talking to firms, what I'm finding, and I'll hit on the governance piece in a minute, which I think is important, but many firms are only operating with 180-degree view of their data rather than 360, right? And what do I mean by that? If you think about an industry like even financial crime, it's common that people are looking for transactions that are just below $10,000, but they're ignoring communications where someone's talking about bribing a government official, right? Or if you look in, customer situations, they may be doing deep analysis on like what deal close rates look like and how their pipeline and funnel are coming together. But they're not getting real-time analytics in terms of the relationship with those customers and the like that you can see only through the communications data. So it's almost like they're, if the structured data is the matter in the universe, then the unstructured data is the dark matter, right? And then people are kind of going, wait a second, there's all of this information that exists there. And so now to your point about governance, in order to bring forward that intelligence, you actually have to govern that in, a very thoughtful way. When we bring on people to work for companies, we give them managers, right? They have performance reviews. There are checks and balances that exist. And those same things are existing now with, agents, right? In terms of the need to manage them and to understand that they're doing their job. And it's all the more important because you could scale out inaccuracy if you're not careful, right? And so what we end up saying with governance is really the importance of a number of different things, right? Number one, you have to have explainability and responsible AI. I think that's table stakes now in terms of what we hear and what we do in the market. The second thing, though, is the systems that govern that. You have to be able to have all of the technical things we talked about in terms of audits and version history and who made the change. But then you also finally need to be able to measure the agent's performance, right? Like if you're introducing a new one, did it do better than the last one? How is that actually performing in production and the like? And so all of those bits of scaffolding and that system of management, it's so critically important if firms are going to actually scale out this intelligence on that front.
Absolutely. I think there's a number of topics you touched on there. We really have to have foundational governance that can be reliable, scalable, and adapting in a way that is moving at the speed of Gen AI and agentic architecture. So we're really at the forefront of this space, but governance rules and best practices have been around. And so setting up those observability guidelines for an organization, setting out how agents should be logging activity, where they should be accessing data, where they shouldn't, is something that we have to just refine and shape. And so while AWS brings the tools, it's really important to construct this for an industry. And I think the position that Smarsh is in such a strong place to help and steer customers here.
We've been through it, everything from regulatory audit through model governance for close to a decade now. In many ways, this industry has actually laid the groundwork for what those model risk management practices look like. And so it's absolutely something that's in, the lifeblood of what we do. But the key thing with any good regulation is you want to have the benefits and to put the guardrails in place, but then you want to automate as much of that as possible so that you can get low friction. Meaning, let's say that you have a wonderful new machine learning model that can give you a pulse of your customers, right? You don't want to have to wait for 12 months for that to get through approval gates. You want to be able to roll that out as quickly as possible. And that's only possible vis-a-vis working on platforms like SageMaker, right? Like integrating in all of the model cards and the different aspects and building that pipeline or that flow in the same way that if there's a new airplane coming out, it goes through wind tunnel testing and it has air traffic control and the like. All of those aspects need to exist for these agents and this intelligence.
So I think that decade of experience definitely sets you apart. And it's one of those opportunities for us to ask, what do you see in the future? What are the 2 to 3 things that you're keeping an eye on as Smarsh that you think that we should all be thinking about as well?
Yeah, I think that what we're going to find is that, and this is probably not a surprise, I think you hear it from a lot, but there's over the next decade, a lot is going to change, right? In terms of, we're already seeing how we interact with data is changing remarkably. And I think we're going to end up in a spot where the time from understanding or getting an insight to acting on that insight is just shrinking markedly, right? And so through that, what's going to end up happening is more and more of this intelligence within this communications data is going to shift from dark matter to being light, right? People are going to have a financial crime program that brings all of these things together. They're going to have an insider risk or security program that brings us together. Their customer aspects are going to bring that together. And I genuinely think when we look back a decade from now, we'll go, I can't believe that there was a time when we were only operating with half of the story. It's the biggest, there's a lot there technically that has to be done, Karen, but it's the biggest change that I see happening.
And I'm mindful of time, but I'll just add kind of two additional points there. So, a lot of this data and research that you're calling out, Brandon, is something that you all have shared in a fascinating white paper, the Smarsh Intelligent Agent. So we're going to be putting up those links in our follow-on submissions. It's going to go out to the audience and be available in the comments. You're also going to see a little bit about the infographics and the data points of what's coming up. And then last but not least, how to get in touch with the Smarsh team. And if you want to get started at the easy play on Marketplace. So I just want to call out those links that are accessible to the viewers.
It's been great to be a launch partner on that. And then if anyone's interested in the mini books, our Chief AI Officer, Dr. Uday Kamath, and the team has written an entire book on a deep dive on LLMs and deep learning.
We love having partners like yourselves on. This is a great opportunity for all of us that are here watching to get to learn. So thanks for sharing those links. Those will be in the comments. Those will be coming in here in real time in a little bit. Brandon, really appreciate it. One last 30-second plug. Sure. I know I said no marketing earlier. What's your pitch? What would you like everybody to do as they leave?
Two things. If you work in risk and compliance, reach out. We can have a major impact in terms of your program and your company. And second, if you're not in risk and compliance, go talk to your teams. They have data that can really help you move a lot of your initiatives forward. And the third, I'll add, work with AWS. It's been a fun journey for us.
Okay, we always love that kind of a plug. Thanks again, Brandon, for joining us here today. And everybody stay on. We will be back in about 20 seconds from now with our second partner guest. Appreciate your joining us on Industries Live.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ben.
Welcome back to Industries Live. That was just a quick break that we took to switch our context of what we're going to be talking about. We have a great lineup of partners that are here today. Awesome conversation that we have going. So if you are just joining us now, Industries Live streams every Tuesday from 8 to 9 Pacific time. And we love hearing from our guests as they are joining in. So please feel free to comment where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear what your location is. I am Dr. Karen Hildebrand. I lead solutions architects, so the technical side of the house. Across many of our industries. And we have aligned around an industry focus because we understand that the context of the industry matters in being able to solve the problems of the industry more quickly. And so when you choose a partner and you're thinking about how do you work with AWS, we really encourage you to talk to our industry teams as they have that expertise that helps you to narrow in on your solutions much more quickly. And so with that, I'm joined by one of our industry leads, Adi, would you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Karen. Hey, folks, I'm Adi Dubashi. I lead our financial services partner solutions team, and we're part of the Center of Excellence, and we really focus on creating those easy-to-use solutions that can help customers for their line of business challenges. And so financial services spans capital markets, banking, payments, and insurance for AWS, and our partners are building on AWS services solving for line of business asks. And so when a customer is thinking about, well, how do I navigate certain risk modeling challenges? How do I navigate surveillance asks of my regulator? We're building those partner solutions on easy to deploy architectures so that you can focus on your business and let that undifferentiated heavy lifting step back and get managed by your trusted platforms and partnerships. So one of the main reasons that I'm in this space, I've been with AWS for 7 years and I've had the chance to do this across a few continents with AWS, with our consulting partners, with our technology partners. But one of the most exciting parts of this role is how I see how we're clearly solving for a use case challenge that a customer faces. And so it often is a combination of technologies and consulting services and AWS coming together. And that's really the exciting part of the AWS partner network. I'm excited about our session today because, we had Smarsh on that really talked about wide surveillance and communications, unstructured data. But now we're moving right to the heart of deep workflows that are about risk modeling, how to assess, scenarios when it comes to KYC processes, AML workflows, and the team that's coming up with Genpact is right at the heart of this and has been for a long time. So I'm excited about our conversation today, Karen.
It's always exciting to see what is happening, and we get the best seat in the house because we actually get to ask the questions in real time. However, you also get the good seat in the house because if you drop a comment in with a question, we will also bring it forward. And I realize, that being said, that I missed a question from Arun in our last session. So don't worry, Arun, if you drop me a message, DM directly on LinkedIn, I will get that question answered for you. Apologies that I missed that in real time. I promise I am watching in real time. So keep me busy, keep me on my toes, drop any questions you have for David. And with that, let's bring David on.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, David, welcome. Do you mind giving us a quick, brief intro about yourself?
Sure. My name is David Zerlip. I lead our Risk Canvas financial crimes technology business at Genpact. Just to get a little bit of background on Risk Canvas and myself. So Risk Canvas was originally founded back in 2015. A lot of the underlying tech and the people that founded it came from the U.S. government, myself included. I got my start in financial crimes at the FBI. And then spent a number of years at the Treasury Department, involved in sanctions programs. So that's kind of the heritage of Risk Canvas. And we were acquired by Genpact in 2019 to complement the great work that Genpact does in the managed service and advisory side in financial crimes. And it's been a great match ever since then.
I want to call out, having been working with our partners across consulting and technology partnerships, this is unique. This is when customer asks translate into deep service-oriented workflows. They then become stronger and nuanced and better productized. And then you have something like a risk canvas come about. It's a fascinating journey where you all started learning from customer challenges, really solving for them, and then creating that IP and framework that just allows you to scale and be repeatable. So risk canvas is quite the feat. David, tell us about how that journey has been for you.
Yeah, no, having that, the Genpact expertise in managed service, we've got in financial crimes alone, we've got over 8,000 people worldwide working operations for, I think, over 50 different, very large financial institutions, fintechs, banks, all over the world. And when we joined Genpact, we did not have that kind of network that we could tap into. But, being part of Genpact, being able to learn from those operators, these folks who have done this, all over the world, faced really challenging problems in financial crimes, and allowed them to help us build better technology solutions. And then, like you said, Adi, ultimately productize those and really start thinking about it as a true product in what has traditionally been a services firm. And as Genpact pivots towards technology and true value add on the technology front, our partners like AWS have been truly very impactful in how we've been able to do that.
I think one of the great things that you bring to the table is an industry insight that we don't always get frontline access to. So would you be willing to share with us a couple of the things that you're seeing as industry trends that are catching the attention at Genpact?
Sure. So, obviously, I think probably the thing that everybody's seeing across every industry is, the proliferation of AI. And, I think in a highly regulated space like financial crimes, I see what I generally refer to as largely AI by press release. So a lot of focus on, marketing side of things and not necessarily so much on the value add to the day-to-day operators and investigators, because it's a really challenging space. You have to have AI components to grow in the space, but the actual value add, I think, for a lot of the applications that we're seeing across the industry are still questionable in terms of how they're truly adding the value for the customers. The other thing that we see, I mean, and this is obviously very relevant to AWS, is 5 years ago when we were AWS native SaaS product, and we were going out to financial institutions and saying, send us all your data, all your most prized data, your suspicious activity report filings, all of that, and we'll do that in Genpact AWS accounts. A lot of people were not receptive to that. And just over the course of a few years, we see, more and more, even very large financial institutions, much more willing to explore that, understand the security mechanisms, the controls that are in place, things like that. And then the last trend, I guess, is, we've got all this huge innovation on the AI front, but I would still say that in the financial crime space, the fundamental challenges are the same. And, I don't see a lot of solutions out there beyond Risk Canvas, obviously, but a lot of solutions solving for some of the fundamental challenges. And those two to us that we always see are, first off, a lack of data access, data centralization. So, financial crimes programs oftentimes have to be that one place, if any, in a financial institution where they have true access to all the data that they need for KYC, for ongoing surveillance, for screening, and all of those things. But most of the platforms in this space are not data platforms. They're not built for centralization of data. And so what we generally see in the space is huge amount of inefficiency from kind of manual searching for data. When you'd see an alert, you say, oh, that, how do I determine if that's suspicious? I go out and I look in, a half dozen to a dozen different source systems to try to put all the pieces together. It's time consuming, it's inefficient. And certainly without that data centralization, it's going to make AI less impactful because it won't have access to that data. So I think, one of the early kind of origin stories around Risk Canvas, we were out meeting with a client, and one of the analysts had 6 monitors on their desk, and we said, what can we do to make your life easier? We're thinking, data centralization, all of this great stuff. He said, can I get a 7th monitor? And that's just often how people are thinking in this space. They're used to the swivel chair, and we're trying to do that differently in Risk Canvas. And then the second thing that we see, it continually holds people back, is kind of the lack of flexibility in their tools. You're talking about an industry where the criminals are using AI. Everybody is moving very quickly, but so many of the tools that exist in this space don't change quickly. They don't change easily, and so that causes programs to often be quite a few steps behind in that financial crimes risk management approach.
And I think Erie Edits, and I probably said that incorrectly, but that's, I think, your handle, had asked that question around, have you seen those types of AI attacks? Do you see those increasing as AI develops? And I can definitely answer that from a cross-industry perspective, that absolutely AI has changed what bad actors can do. We've definitely seen that in the digital publication space. So your comment about blogs really hit me on that one. It made me laugh, and that's very much something that we have had to address. And we've worked with C2PA in order to release how to ensure that you have a kind of a digital watermark on any of those publication assets. But similarly, David, you get to see this. Would you like to answer that one from the kind of financial services perspective of what is the increase in bad actor rates, and how does Genpact think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, we're seeing AI really kind of changing everything. And I don't know if I don't have offhand good measurements of how what the increase is here, but certainly in terms of maybe onboarding documentation, being able to provide fake documents that look increasingly real. You're talking about a lot of fintechs, more modern institutions are doing customer identification verification by selfie now, and when you're more easily able to fake driver's license, things like that. The technology, certainly needs to be working faster than that. And like I said, in this space, especially just how regulated it is, it's often very difficult to keep up.
Yeah, we're also in a world where the verification word, the watermark, as you said, Karen, as well, it's going to be so important because we're in a time when you're going to have infinite generation of content. You're going to get very nuanced, very personalized messaging that says, well, this is me. I do want to interact with you, and I am the human being that I claim to be. On the other side, even with face detection, just a few years ago, I remember partners would come up and talk about, hey, we can create a bank account in a matter of minutes because we just switch on the selfie and the person kind of shows themselves, and that's a far better authentication than the workflows that were in the past. But that too, in a post-Gen AI world, is going to change so dramatically because those filters can be auto-generated in a matter of minutes. And so maintaining that air gap is just a consistent journey. You have to constantly keep evolving and emerging new ways to solve for these challenges. You're going to see attackers and bad actors keep coming with more nuanced forms of and more sophisticated forms of attack. But you also, because of the financial services industry, you tend to see that once a pattern begins, it tends to repeat everywhere in the world. And so when you kind of see a bad actor, in Hong Kong, it takes them a matter of minutes to start repeating those patterns in other scenarios. David, you've been in that background. You've had work with the FBI. You've seen this on the side of Risk Canvas as well. Tell us what that journey is like, and what do you foresee kind of coming out over the next few weeks that we should be developing and solving for customers?
Yeah, so our focus is on really ensuring that our platform is flexible enough to adapt to the challenges that are coming. And so, like I said, that inflexibility really causes the financial institutions to be behind in that chase. But with Risk Canvas, so we've had a philosophy from day one that first of all, data needs to be centralized within the platform, and that needs to be done very easily. So we have a kind of schema agnostic approach. We use AWS native services that allow us to bring in usually the entire corpus of customer account transaction data, which is really unheard of in this space, to really truly have all that centralized in a platform. And then once you have all that data, you have those signals that you need. We provide really flexible tools to be able to adapt to those. So we're obviously living in an AI a world, but in this space, for those not familiar, a lot of people probably think that if they don't know financial crimes in and out, they think, oh, I can use AI to monitor for suspicious activity and patterns of behavior. And there's certainly plenty of different ways in which that can be done, but the regulators and the examiners all over the world are still very much used to a rules-based system with very high levels of explainability, auditability. If they wanted to guarantee, every single time something will hit and will alert, and that it will never not do that if it's expected. So in Risk Canvas, we're focused on a few different ways of using AI to kind of help make deterministic rules and workflows better. So, we rolled out earlier this year, we rolled out a way to use Gen AI to write transaction monitoring scenarios. So it's rules-based system. We've always had a really flexible transaction monitoring system where users can go in there, they can build their own rules, they can simulate them against real data. Beautiful thing about AWS services, we can just spin up new clusters and run those scenarios and see how they would have performed. And like I said, you could move to AI. That would certainly be a way of solving some of these problems. But every institution we've seen that really and has invested in that ultimately ends up with both rules-based and AI-based alerting, and oftentimes is just doubling their workload. So we're focused right now still in the rules-based world, as long as the regulators are going to be there. But how do you make things more flexible? How do you lower the barrier to kind of technological build out of what can be very complex rules? So we introduced Gen AI. Instead of writing a technical query, write a natural language query that a business analyst is able to kind of say, this is what I'm looking for. Help me build this. And then the next side of that is going to be continuous feedback loops. So, once again, if you're stuck in a deterministic world, how do you ensure that you're making those better? And how do you ensure that you're guiding and providing the insights that the users need to write the best rules, to come up with the best monitoring that they can? And we're doing the same. We're looking to move into tools for the same for workflow building. All of these things that, in Risk Canvas, we've always tried to be very flexible, but we just really want to always lower the bar on who can be doing these things, not having to rely on, your back-end technology teams and things like that. We want the true end users to be able to manage their program. And through that type of stuff, we're able to see, huge reductions in false positive alerting, much better continuous improvement of workflows, automation, API integrations, things like that are driving efficiency in a lot of the same ways that just adding maybe a bot or a chat bot to your workflow might not be as effective to do that approach.
So shout out to Maggie, who's joining us from Kansas City, and Mohammed from Oxford in the UK. But Khalifa has a question here, and I think it's really relevant to what you were just talking about how do you, if you centralize the data, who owns that, and what does that even look like when you're thinking about bringing all of those signals together?
Sure. Right now in our approach, our clients own the data. It's stored in our accounts, but they hold all the keys. They can pull access at any time. But there's definitely a lot of value that we see in the industry from moving towards some consortium approaches, where AI models can be trained across customer data. Baby steps in this industry, especially just because the sensitive nature and the size of the data that exists. It's going to take time to get there, and there certainly are some vendors out there, maybe more on the fraud space, that are doing great stuff with consortium and shared data. But right now, our clients maintain full ownership of that data.
Yeah, and David, I think what you're calling out, right, is as the data comes together and the customer is the owner of the data, and one of the primary bottlenecks has been the false flagging process. And I think the risk scoring that you all do, the ability to really understand the rules-based process allows to really drop these false flags, because it doesn't matter if you can spot, 10x the number of flags. You kind of need a human or a digital assistant / human combination to really vet those and make sure that the false flags go down, because that's exactly where the bottleneck lies. And that's exactly where the regulator says, well, I don't want you to miss out on anything. I'm going to keep a close eye on you. So what's that journey like? And I'm mindful we have a demo coming up, but I'm really curious about that view.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and for those who don't know financial crimes, it is an industry where it is not unheard of to get 98, 99% false positive rates. And a lot of times we see that just because, like I said, everybody's doing AI, it's very flashy, but there are some very fundamental things that can be done better in this industry. And, we believe we do those in Risk Canvas. But, through data centralization, having better access to data, having flexibility in how your rules are, how they equate to your business, your products, your customer base, your risk, things like that, and being able to really truly write them for your institution, we see leads to pretty large reductions in those rates. So I'll give an example. We had a client who, before they came onto Risk Canvas, their previous system was flagging something like 99% of the alerts that they were getting were actually from one rule. were internal book transfers. It was just between internal accounts. And so clearly not what they're trying to monitor on. It's not where you're going to see suspicious activity. But in their platform before Risk Canvas, they had no way of changing that rule. They had no way of integrating that data element that would have indicated that it was an internal book transfer. So when they got into Risk Canvas, it took them 10 seconds to go in there and say, well, and not this field equals internal book transfer. All of a sudden, their rates dropped, 99%, and they started getting good alerts finally and able to see, the signal through all that noise. And so, like I said, while everybody wants to be touting the benefits of AI, and certainly we are too. There's a lot of fundamental things that platforms in this space and institutions can be doing before getting into the complexities of AI.
Now, I obviously would love to ask you questions about the technology of this, and I know that you have built on Amazon Bedrock since 2023, and I'm curious what that journey has been like for you. We've talked a little bit earlier about staying ahead and constant innovation. Tell us a little bit about what it was like being an early adopter, and then how do you continue to innovate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we back in summer of 2023, we graciously got access to early pre-release versions of Bedrock. And we immediately decided, let's bring our clients together. Let's bring our developers and teams together to see, what can we do with this this new technology? How can we use this? And we immediately zeroed in on suspicious activity report narrative writing, which for those not familiar, whenever when financial institutions all over the world monitoring for potential money laundering, criminal behavior, they ultimately have to file a report with the government in governments all over the world. And the longest part of that report often is a kind of a narrative that explains in English or whatever language what they saw and all the details. And like I said, I got my start in at the FBI. I used to read about 10,000 of those a month at the FBI, and they are written every different way possible. There's no two-way that that institutions write them. Everybody has their own style and format, what they include. Certainly, definitely, some more helpful than others. So when we looked at that problem, we said, if we want to build something that's generative AI narrative writing, it needs to be flexible. It needs to be, able to, not one size fits all. It needs to adapt to all the different styles that exist out there. It needs to adapt to the fact that every different, criminal typology is different. And so we used a few-shot learning technique through Bedrock, used, off-the-shelf LLMs that were available. And in September of 2023, we were actually able to put, I don't know if I'm legally allowed to say the first Bedrock production instance, but one of the first production instances of Bedrock was for suspicious activity narrative writing. And it's been fascinating to see across our client base the different policies and processes that they have for AI adoption. Some of them said, yeah, green light, go right into production. It's great. Others, one of our clients took almost a year of internal deliberations, a lot of documentation around Bedrock and the security aspects and how data is, not retained and things like that. So, there's been a lot of learning for both ourselves and the industry on how to best adopt AI. And that will only continue to grow. Hopefully we understand that there are, everybody is getting better at this. But definitely continuing to work with clients to understand the challenges they face and how we can use AI in their system most effectively. Getting that feedback from regulators is really important. We don't want to be way out over our skis, and we're excited to continue that journey.
And I know that we are running short of time, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that you brought a demo along of Risk Canvas. And I think the way you just described of working backwards from customers is exactly what we always love to hear. So your experience with Bedrock, figuring out problems to solve, being able to actually bring that together, we'd love to see it in action. Do you mind showing the demo?
Yeah, please. Let's
The Risk Canvas agentic-powered research assistant continues to evolve, bringing smarter, faster decision-making directly into the hands of investigators and program leaders. Developed in collaboration with AWS and fully embedded across the platform, this tool provides complete context across customer profiles, account activity, transactions, and investigative history. With everything in one place, users can act faster, detect risk earlier, and make confident decisions. Here's how the tool works behind the scenes. AML analysts interact with the assistant directly through the Risk Canvas UI. Their query is first processed by a supervisor agent, which understands AML context, coordinates supporting agents, and handles summarization and visualization. From there, data research agents go to work, analyzing transactions, accounts, items, similarities, and key performance metrics. These agents tap into the full Risk Canvas dataset and external knowledge bases, all while operating within guardrails to ensure accuracy and compliance. Just ask a question like, "Show me recent wires for Russian customers with new accounts and recent suspicious activity reports." Within seconds, the assistant highlights findings like recent wire transfers, account opening details, recent suspicious activity report filings, even recommended actions. From timelines and trend lines to network graphs and summaries, everything is automatically visualized, making oversight effortless. Want to understand team performance? Ask, "Show me average handle times for AML alerts over the past 30 days." The assistant generates segmented insights and visualizations to pinpoint coaching opportunities and streamline reviews. Risk Canvas research agents reduce investigation time, optimize team performance, and enhance oversight, unlocking efficiency without sacrificing control.
That's an awesome demo. David, I think we just have about 2 minutes to wrap up, but any closing thoughts in terms of how we can think about Risk Canvas? And I have a little bit to add in there on how we're already going to market, but after you.
No, first of all, I just wanted to give a shout out that tool that we just showed was developed in close coordination with AWS through an experience-based acceleration program. Our team got together for 3 days down at HQ2 in Virginia, and AWS was fantastic. And honestly, that is how I see us, really accelerating growth in the market, is tapping into all the latest and greatest that AWS is putting out. We are fully invested in AWS as a partner, and excited to see all that is rolling out on your side.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And just want to call out, right, this is exactly how we think about partnerships at AWS. We really are focused in investing with our partners who are solving for business challenges. We really invest in them through activities like experience-based acceleration, and then drive those as go-to-market motions with our regional teams. And so what that often results in is public posts such as our webinar and podcast today. We also have several kind of gated assets that can be used and subscribed to when customers ask. But most importantly, we actually drive workshops at the ground level. So if you're thinking of, hey, I'd really like to dive into this platform, we're going to put in the links of how you can get in touch with the Genpact team, but also the AWS teams that you work with are happy to help you run some of these demos and invest in proof of concepts to help you out. But with that, I think this has been a fascinating discussion, David. Really appreciate you kind of talking us through Risk Canvas. Today, we really got an overview of everything that's happening in the risk world on AWS. But I'm super excited to keep running this series with y'all. And we're going to look forward to see you in about a month on Tuesday on when you're going to see the next FSI one. And in about 2 weeks, where you're going to see the media and entertainment session coming up. Karen, any final closing thoughts?
No, I think you got it. Thanks for joining us today on Industries Live, and we appreciate everybody from all over the world. I think our last visitor popped in from South Africa. So thank you, everybody, for your participation, and look forward to seeing you on the next Industries Live.